Hey guys, tonight we are slipping back into the Middle Ages. Not as a knight with a shiny sword, not as a queen lounging in silk, but as you, a plain farmer. The kind of person who wakes up long before the rooster even bothers to clear his throat. The bed under you is not really a bed, just a pile of straw that clings to your hair and pokes your back in that charming, rustic spa treatment no one asked for. Outside, it is still dark, and the air tastes of damp earth and smoke from last night's fire. You can hear the faint stir of animals in the shed, a cow shifting, a chicken rustling, as if they too are disappointed that morning has arrived this soon. Let me be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this lifestyle for more than 2 days. And that's me being generous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want, leave me a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always smile when I hear someone drifting off to sleep halfway across the world because of my sleepy little history rambles. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster eventually does crow, loud enough to remind you that nature doesn't care if you were dreaming about warm blankets or modern coffee machines. You stretch stiff arms and push yourself upright, bones already creaking like old wood. The floor beneath your feet is dirt, packed hard and cool, and you quickly step into rough woolen clothes that itch before you even finish pulling them on. No one cared about comfort labels back then. If it covers your body and doesn't fall apart in the rain, congratulations, it's fashion. Your breath fogs in the air, and outside, the horizon holds the faintest smear of grey dot in the corner. A few embers still glow in the hearth, weak and red, the last survivors of last night's fire. You coax them back to life with dry twigs, watching sparks jump, because without fire, your family has no light, no warmth, no way to cook even the plainest gruel. Historians still debate exactly how early peasants would rise, but most agree it was before dawn, because the sun, not your alarm clock, dictated when you worked. Honestly, the sun is the most demanding boss in history. No breaks, no overtime pay, just relentless. You open the rough wooden door and step outside. The cold mist clings to your skin instantly, sliding into your sleeves and collar like it owns the place. Your little cottage sits on a patch of land that isn't really yours. You're just borrowing it from the local lord, who will remind you of that at tax time. The fields stretch out in front, dark soil still damp from night dew. Your bare hands already ache at the thought of gripping the plough again. A couple of oxen snort in the pen, heavy, stubborn creatures who look at you as if to say, good luck dragging us today. Their breath fogs thick in the morning air, stronger and warmer than yours, and you can't help but envy them because they get to chew grass while you chew disappointment. The village around you is stirring, faint voices carrying through the fog. Someone coughs harshly, another child cries, and you hear the creak of another door as neighbors shuffle out, all dressed in the same muted browns and grays, the timeless medieval color palette of mud chic. A woman balances a bucket as she heads to the well, her shawl pulled tight, while 2 boys kick at each other in the mud, their laughter echoing through the chill air. Even in this grey hour, life is noisy, crowded, and shared. Privacy is something you traded away when you were born a peasant. Your stomach already grumbles, but food can wait. The fields can't. You grab the wooden yoke and lead the oxen to the furrows, The soil smells rich but heavy, the kind that sticks to your shoes and drags you down. You press the plow into the earth, shoulders straining, arms shaking, mud flying back against your shins. The oxen groan and shuffle forward, pulling slow and stubborn. Every step feels like a negotiation. You mutter at them, sometimes curse, though not too loudly, because words carry in a village like this, and you don't want to be remembered as the one who yelled at cows. As the horizon lightens, the first streaks of sunrise spill across the fields. It's beautiful in that way beauty always feels when you're too tired to appreciate it. Your breath clouds with each exhale, and sweat already beads along your hairline, despite the cold. The ground is unforgiving, the plow blade dull, and your back bends into the shape of labor that has lasted for centuries. There is a rhythm to it though. Push, step, strain, pull, repeat. A rhythm that dulls your mind until the only thought left is survival, nearby. Another farmer calls out, his voice carrying a joke about how the oxen walk straighter than he can after too much ale at the last feast. You laugh politely, because humor is survival too. A woman passes carrying a bundle of sticks, nodding toward your effort, her face lined but strong. Children dart past, chasing each other, one carrying a stick like a sword, because even when you're poor and tired, play finds its way in. What most people don't realize is that peasants didn't just work their own strips of land. You also had to help with the shared fields, the Lord's domain, land that belonged to him but demanded your labor. Imagine finishing your own homework and then being told you must also do the teacher's homework. No wonder your back already feels older than your years. The plow jolts against a stone, nearly pulling your arms from their sockets. You stumble, catch yourself, and glance up at the sky, already lighter now, the mist slowly burning off. A flock of crows wheels overhead, cawing like hecklers at a comedy show you never auditioned for. Somewhere a church bell rings, faint but insistent, a reminder that your life is not just tied to soil and sun, but to rituals that keep time in their own way. And as you bend again, gripping the handle, your hands raw, your body weary, you realize this is only the first hour of the day. The fields stretch endlessly, the sun is only climbing higher, and every furrow you carve feels like one more reminder that survival here is not dramatic, not glamorous, but constant. Dawn has barely broken, and already you're tired enough to want to collapse back onto that poky straw bed. But no, there's no choice. You keep plowing, one step, one breath, one aching pull at a time, while the day opens before you. Long and merciless, your stomach growls, louder than the oxen, and at last you can step away from the stubborn plow, at least for a moment. Breakfast in the Middle Ages isn't what you picture when you think of the word breakfast. There's no neat stack of pancakes with syrup, no steaming coffee mug waiting to hug your soul. Instead, you get what's left of yesterday's bread, so hard you could probably use it as a weapon. It's coarse, brown, and filled with grains and husks that catch in your teeth. You take a bite anyway, because this is energy, and energy means survival. If you were hoping for butter, well, Sarah cows don't just hand over luxuries. Beside you, other villagers gather, sitting on rough benches or just squatting in the dirt. A boy gnaws at his crust while his sister slurps from a small cup of thin ale. Yes, ale for breakfast. Don't roll your eyes. It isn't the strong stuff you're picturing. Medieval ale is weak, barely alcoholic, and safer than water, because water often carries more surprises than you'd want to swallow. Historians still debate how much alcohol was really in it, but the consensus is that you were more likely to get a mild buzz than a proper hangover. It was hydration with attitude. You chew slowly, trying to convince your jaw that this lump of bread is edible, though it resists with the same stubbornness as the oxen. A woman passes around a little bowl of peas, dried and boiled into mush. You scoop some with your bread, softening the edges, and suddenly it feels almost like a meal. The smoke from nearby hearths drifts through the air, mingling with the damp smell of mud and animals. It's not pleasant, but it is life. Children scamper by, clutching bits of bread and laughing with crumbs stuck to their cheeks. One little boy pretends his crust is a knight's sword, waving it proudly until it snaps in half. The other kids cheer because entertainment is wherever you find it, even in stale carbs. You smile because in this grey and grueling world, laughter is the spice most meals lack. Someone offers you a sip from their jug of ale, and you drink, the liquid faintly bitter but washing down the dryness in your mouth. You wipe your lips with your sleeve because napkins are not a thing you'll see here, unless you count your own skin. You glance around, watching faces lined with fatigue even this early in the day. Farmers eat not to delight in flavors, but to fill the empty space inside their bellies, so they can go back to bending their backs under the sky. A neighbor jokes about how he dreams of a breakfast with honey, cheese, maybe even eggs every morning, but then laughs at himself, because those are luxuries reserved for better tables. Maybe once a year, during a feast, you'll taste something sweet and rich. Most days, though, you gnaw at bread that fights back. If you had a medieval Yelp account, breakfast would get 1 star for presentation, 1 star for flavor, and 5 stars for keeping you alive. The bread reminds you of how central grain is to your life. If the harvest is poor, your belly knows it first. If the harvest fails entirely, famine follows, and you don't even want to imagine what that means. There are stories passed around. The village, hushed whispers of winters where people boiled bark, or worse, just to fill their stomachs. For now, though you have bread, and that is enough. Not enjoyable, not decadent, but enough. Around the group, you notice how people dip their bread in ale to soften it. You try it yourself, and suddenly it feels less like chewing a rock and more like chewing, well, a slightly soggy rock, but progress is progress. A woman offers a handful of curds to her child, who beams as if this lumpy cheese is treasure. And to be fair, it is. Dairy is rare in everyday meals, since most milk goes to calves or to the Lord's manor. That small bite of curd feels like a festival. You glance at the sun climbing a little higher, golden light spilling over the cottages, casting long shadows across the muddy paths. A man stretches, yawning, and slaps his knee as if to convince himself it's time to return to the fields. You savor one last chew of bread, ignoring how it grinds against your teeth like sand, and just as you're finishing, an old woman mutters about omens. She points at the way the mist is clinging low in the valley, claiming it means a wet harvest ahead. Others shake their heads, some nod, some just roll their eyes. Historians might still argue about how seriously peasants believed in weather, omens, but when your entire existence depends on crops, you can't help but look for signs everywhere. Modern weather apps may be wrong half the time, but at least they don't blame mist for ruining your dinner. As the group rises, stretching sore limbs, you stand too, brushing crumbs from your tunic. Your belly is not full, but it is not empty either, and that is the line you live on. You look down at the hard crust left in your hand, and tuck it away for later, because who knows when hunger will roar again. Waste is not an option. Waste is a luxury only the rich can afford. The oxen grunt from their pen, reminding you the fields are waiting. The bread in your stomach feels like a stone, heavy but reliable. Breakfast is over, and the day stretches ahead, wide and merciless. You wipe your hands on your rough woolen trousers, glance once at the faint smoke curling above the cottages, and step back toward the plough. The earth will not till itself, and your body, whether it likes it or not, is the engine that must push it forward. You sigh, already knowing that by the time the sun climbs high, your arms will ache, your back will scream, and your stomach will once again be begging for mercy. For now, though, you press on, fueled by bread and ale, by habit and necessity, by the quiet, stubborn rhythm of survival. The plough waits where you left it. Heavy, wooden, a little crooked, and older than most of the children running around the village. Your hands curl around the handle again, rough wood against rougher skin, and you sigh because breakfast, if you can even call it that, has already burned away. You lean your weight forward, pressing the blade into the damp earth, and the oxen snort as if they resent this whole arrangement as much as you do. Honestly, they might be your closest co-workers, their pace sets yours, and their attitude is about as cheerful as any office team meeting you've ever had. The soil resists with every inch. It clumps, it drags, it clings to the blade as though it wants to be left alone. Your shoulders strain, and you feel the ache travel down into your spine. The kind of pain that announces itself loudly and then settles in like an unwanted roommate. Sweat pricks your skin even though the air is cool, because effort doesn't wait for summer. With each push, the plough jerks and rattles, and you mutter under your breath words you wouldn't want the priest to overhear. Across the fields, other farmers work in their strips of land, the patchwork layout stretching out like a quilt stitched by someone with a questionable sense of geometry. Narrow strips for each family, side by side. No fences, just boundaries, remembered in heads and grudges. A neighbor glances over and yells a half-joke about how your oxen are straighter than your furrows. You laugh, mostly because humor is cheaper than retaliation. Though the thought of tripping him later crosses your mind briefly, the tools you hold are simple, painfully so. A wooden plough with an iron-tipped blade if you're lucky, though often the blade dulls faster than you can sharpen it. The handles wobble, patched together with rope, and splinters find your palms like bees finding flowers. You grip tighter anyway, because letting go is not an option. Every furrow you carve is another small insurance policy against starvation, and every slip of the blade is a reminder that the earth doesn't care about your schedule. You pause for a moment, watching another man swing a hoe with rhythmic strokes, chopping at weeds that threaten to choke the barley. His movements are steady, practiced, almost graceful if you squint. Tools become extensions of the body out here, wood and iron merging with bone and muscle. Still, the body breaks long before the land does. It's said peasants often carried the same tool their entire lives, patching, mending, binding, never truly replacing. Imagine passing down a hammer in your family for generations, not as a keepsake, but because you literally cannot afford another. A child scurries past, sent to scare crows from the fields. He waves his arms and shouts, his voice cracking in the cold morning air. The crows, unbothered, hop a few steps and then return, mocking him with cause. You watch him try again, and you can't help but chuckle. Somewhere deep down, you admire the stubbornness. It's a trait you all share. though often the birds seem to win more than you do. Your oxen suddenly stop, heads dipping as they chew. Stubbornly at some patch of grass, you tug at the yoke, muttering promises of a better life they will never understand. They blink at you slowly, unimpressed. You swear the animals know who's really in charge here. A neighbor walks by and jokes that your oxen are better fed than most peasants, and you shrug because it's not entirely untrue. If the beasts fail, you fail, and no one wants to be the punchline of that lesson. The sun climbs higher, the light spilling golden across the damp earth, revealing every clod, every root, every stone waiting to catch your blade. The rhythm returns. Push, groan, stumble, recover. Your back bends into it until you wonder if you'll ever stand straight again. And maybe you won't. Medieval skeletons unearthed centuries later often show twisted spines, worn joints, the clear tattoos of endless work carved right into bone. Not that you need archaeology to tell you this. You can already feel it setting in. There is a strange intimacy between you and the soil. Your sweat drips into it, your breath fogs above it, your tools tear at it, and yet this same earth is what will feed you later. You curse it now, but you will thank it at harvest, assuming the weather doesn't betray you first. Someone nearby mutters about the last year's floods, the way entire patches of crops drowned before they could be gathered. Another man counters with a story of a drought that cracked the ground open like pottery. Historians still debate which disasters were worse for peasants, but honestly, when your dinner depends on the clouds, every weather report feels like a threat. A flock of geese waddles past the edge of the field, hissing at anyone who gets too close. Their sharp beaks gleam in the light, and you eye them warily. Geese are the true bullies of the medieval village. Forget knights or bandits, geese are the real danger. You grip your plough tighter and pretend not to notice as one stares you down. With cold, beady eyes, you push forward, your body screaming, until your arms tremble and your breath comes in ragged pulls. The oxen shuffle, slow and reluctant, their hooves pressing deep into the mud. The furrow grows longer, straight enough to count as success, crooked enough to remind you of your limitations. Another farmer nearby hums under his breath, a low tune rising and falling with his hoe strokes. The melody is simple, wordless, but it carries through the air like a reminder that work is less unbearable when wrapped in rhythm. You join quietly, humming along, your voice blending with his until the sound becomes part of the field itself. A sudden shout draws your attention. Someone's plough has broken. The man kneels, cursing softly as he tries to tie it back together. With strips of leather, you feel sympathy, but also relief, because for once it isn't your problem. Tools break constantly, with splinters, iron bends, and replacing them is costly, sometimes impossible. Often you rely on the village blacksmith, who can fix what others cannot, though at a price that cuts as sharply as his hammer. The man's wife hurries over, scolding him for pulling too hard, as if gentleness has any place in this labor. You turn back to your own plough, grateful that today, at least, it still holds. The sun is higher now, and your arms feel like lead. The bread from earlier sits heavy in your gut, but the energy is fading, replaced by exhaustion that seeps into your bones. You wipe sweat from your forehead with the back of your hand, smearing dirt across your skin. Your tunic clings damp against your shoulders, and your legs ache with each step forward. The oxen grunt, their sides heaving, and you rest for a moment, leaning against the handle, both of you catching your breath. And then, with a sigh, you press on again, because the field is not finished, and the day is not done. You push the blade into the soil, feel it bite, and let your body fall back into the rhythm. The land is endless, your strength is limited, but surrender is not an option. You toil with tools that betray you, on soil that resists you, under a sun that ignores you. And still, somehow, you keep going. Because this is your life, and there is no other. The plough rests in the field, abandoned like a tired companion, while you straighten your back with a groan that could wake the crows. The day is not done, not even close, because after you've bled your strength into the soil, the Lord expects his share. Of course, he didn't push the plough, or scatter seed, or trip in the mud, but his appetite is as much a part of the harvest as rain and sun. You wipe your hands on your tunic, smearing dirt over dirt, and start walking toward the manor. The manor rises on a low hill, timber beams and stone walls catching the sunlight in a way that makes it look almost smug. It isn't a castle, not quite, but compared to your Waterland daub hut, it might as well be a palace. The path winds past other peasants, all trudging in the same direction. Baskets balanced, carts creaking, children trailing reluctantly. There's a kind of pilgrimage in it, though the god waiting at the top is more interested in grain than prayers. At the gate, a steward waits with a ledger, quill scratching like an insect's leg as each family announces what they've brought. Grain sacks thump down, hens squawk in protest, jars of honey glisten in the light. The steward doesn't smile, doesn't frown, just records it all with the same detached air of a man counting coins that don't belong to him. You place your share before him, heavier than you'd like, lighter than he will approve. His eyes flick up, then down again. And you know what that means. Expect questions later. Around you, the courtyard hums with activity. Servants hurry past. With trays, boys carry firewood, and the Lord's dogs weave between legs, snapping at scraps. Somewhere above, a window opens, and for a moment you glimpse the lady of the manor, silk sleeve trailing as she leans out. She watches with idle curiosity, as if you and the others are an exotic performance brought to her doorstep. You lower your gaze quickly, because no good comes from being noticed. The Lord appears at last, riding a horse so well fed it makes your oxen look skeletal. His cloak swings with practiced drama, fur glinting at the edges, his boots shining even where mud should have one. He doesn't look at you directly. He addresses the air, his voice booming, listing new obligations as though reading them from Scripture. There will be extra grain required for the coming feast. Repairs must be made to the bridge before winter. Every man is to give days of labor to the domain fields. The words fall like stones, each one heavier than the last. You nod, along with the others, because what else can you do? A man who refuses a lord's demand is like a chicken refusing the knife. Not long for this world. Still, resentment coils in your stomach, twisting tighter than hunger. You think of the hours already spent in the fields, of the aching muscles, of the meager bread waiting at home, and wonder how much more can be taken. A neighbor whispers beside you, too softly for the steward to hear. He reminds you that peasants not only owed crops but also labor, a system called corvée. Some had to give 2 or 3 days a week to the Lord's own fields, leaving less time for their own. It was, essentially, rent paid in sweat. You murmur back that it feels less like rent and more like theft, and he grins briefly before returning to silence. One peasant dares to speak up, mentioning the poor harvest last year, suggesting perhaps a smaller tithe might be fair. The courtyard falls still, everyone pretending they didn't hear. The steward stiffens, the Lord's smile tightens, and the man's words hang in the air like smoke from a damp fire. The Lord responds with honeyed venom, praising loyalty, condemning laziness, promising divine favor for obedience. The man bows quickly, apologizing, his voice cracking. Later, he will be remembered as foolish, though secretly many agreed with him. You remember hearing that in some villages, peasants tried to resist, hiding grain in pits or carrying it off to distant relatives. Some even disguised sacks under straw or buried food beneath their floors. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Historians still debate how widespread this quiet defiance really was. But the stories remain, whispered between neighbors, when the steward is out of earshot. For now, the demands continue. The Lord gestures broadly, announcing that his soldiers require better equipment, that his stables need more hay, that his wine stores must be replenished. You almost laugh wine. You haven't tasted wine in years. Your drink is water that tastes faintly of mud, or ale so weak it might as well be flavored water. Still, he speaks as though everyone has vineyards tucked behind their huts. You smirk inwardly, though you keep your face blank. The steward closes the ledger with a snap, and the Lord dismisses you with a wave, as if you are gnats buzzing too close to his ear. The crowd disperses slowly, weary feet dragging, muttered, complaints slipping into the air like smoke. A boy trips over a stone, spilling a basket of apples, and the dogs pounce, snapping up fruit with more enthusiasm than you've ever seen them show meat. You chuckle despite yourself. At least someone left happy. Walking back down the hill, you feel the weight of absence more than the weight of what you carried up. Your own larder at home will look emptier tonight. Shelves barer, baskets lighter. You try not to think of the coming winter, or of sickness, or of children crying for bread. You focus instead on the sound of your feet in the dust, the rhythm of the road, the way the sky has softened into late afternoon light, someone beside. You sighs, remarking that serving a Lord is like serving the weather, unpredictable, merciless, impossible to argue with. You laugh quietly, then correct them. At least the weather doesn't write everything down in a ledger. The others grin, though their eyes are tired. Jokes are small armor, but they are armor all the same. Back at your hut, you set down the empty basket, the hollowness echoing through your bones. You sit on the low stool by the fire, stretching your sore hands toward the weak flames. For a moment, you let your eyes close, the murmurs of the village drifting through the open door footsteps. Distant voices, the bark of a dog. The day presses on, and though exhaustion weighs heavy, you know tomorrow will bring the same demands, the same fields, the same voices. But for now, you breathe, just once, in and out, and let yourself be still. The manor shrinks behind you as you shuffle back into the heart of the village, baskets swinging empty at your side. The dirt track curves toward the old stone well, and there, as always, half the village seems gathered. Water may be the excuse, but words are the real draw. Buckets creak, ropes squeak, but the real current flowing here is gossip. You join the edge of the circle, pretending to adjust your sleeve. Ears pricked. The women talk first, voices rising and falling like sparrows in a hedge. They compare whose cow gave more milk, whose bread rose taller, whose husband stumbled home smelling suspiciously of ale. The men chime in too, though less often, usually to insist that yes, they did catch a fish this big, or no, they weren't asleep in the barn again. Children dart between legs, chasing one another. while every so often a grandmother hushes them with a hand sharper than a switch. You lower your bucket into the well, letting the rope groan as it unwinds. Cool air rises from the stone shaft, carrying the scent of damp earth and moss. When you draw it up, the water sparkles in the sun, but you barely notice your attention is on the words swirling around you. A wedding is being planned between the miller's daughter and a shepherd's son. Apparently, the dowry includes not just goats, but also a patched cloak that everyone pretends is fine wool. You try not to laugh. In truth, half the village will come to watch, not for love's sake, but for the dancing and the ale. Next comes the scandal. Someone swears they saw the Reeves apprentice sneaking into the baker's shed after dark. Of course, maybe he was after bread, but the way the baker's wife has been smiling lately makes the villagers raise eyebrows. A boy snickers, repeating what he overheard, and his mother promptly clips his ear. You look away, smirking, thinking, how gossip multiplies faster than rabbits. And then, of course, festivals. The talk shifts to the coming midsummer feast bonfires, games, songs that everyone pretends to know the words to. One woman insists that last year a drunk farmer jumped the fire and singed his tunic. Another swears it was two farmers, and the tunic belonged to someone else entirely. The details blur, but the laughter is sharp and bright. Rolling out over the square, you sip from your bucket, the water cold on your tongue. Someone nudges you, asking whether you'll be at the feast. You shrug, of course you'll be there. Who would miss the one night of the year when the bread is thicker, the ale flows, and even the Lord pretends to smile? It isn't optional, really. Festivals are glue for the community, and absence is noticed. Some say they began as pagan rites, reshaped by priests into something more respectable. Others argue the old ways never left, just put on a cross and carried on. Scholars can't seem to agree which parts were ancient ritual and which were church invention, but the result is the same. A night where peasants feel like kings, at least until morning chores. Near the well, two old men bicker over who owns the strip of land by the hedge. Each insists his family's ploughed it since the last plague, and neither intends to give in. Their argument drifts into a long account of ancestors, feuds, and suspiciously convenient memories. You wonder if they even care about the land anymore, or if the fight itself has become tradition. People step around them with practiced ease, carrying buckets, ignoring the raised voices like background birdsong. You overhear another tidbit. The steward's daughter might be betrothed to someone from a nearby village. Whispers suggest he's wealthy, or at least wealthier than any of you. The talk carries a tone of envy wrapped in politeness, like everyone congratulates her while quietly calculating how many chickens she have compared to their daughters. Your neighbor leans in close, voice dropping. He tells you that wells, aside from giving water, are also where secrets spill easiest. He's right. The well is the village's mouth, speaking every joy, sorrow, and complaint. Some wells even gained reputations as magical, places where people tossed coins or whispered prayers. You grin if only the water granted wishes. You'd ask for softer beds or bread without weevils. The chatter continues, winding from births to funerals, to who makes the best ale. One man boasts his wife brews stronger stuff than anyone else, only for another to mutter that stronger doesn't always mean better, especially when it sends you running for the bushes. The crowd laughs, and the man bows dramatically, conceding the point. You notice how gossip fills gaps left by hunger and hardship. Words are a cheap feast, laughter a kind of ale that warms without cost. You think, Riley, that if gossip could be stored in sacks, the Lord would demand it for his tithe. Maybe that's why it flows so freely here, no steward, no ledger, just the open air. As you leave the well, bucket sloshing, you glance back. The group still circles, stories spinning endlessly. Some are true, some invented, but all are needed. Life is too long and too hard without a little drama, even if it's borrowed from someone else's shed or wedding bed. You walk on, the hum of voices fading, though a few phrases cling to your mind like burrs. They'll echo later, over supper, when you retell them with your own embellishments. After all, gossip isn't just heard, it's passed on, reshaped, and gifted anew, like bread broken and shared. And so, with the village chatter buzzing faintly in your ears, you head back toward your hut, carrying water but also carrying stories, as essential to survival as grain and firewood. By the time the sun climbs high, the air presses down like a heavy blanket, and your stomach growls with a voice louder than any church bell. You've been hauling, ploughing, carrying, nodding, gossiping, and sighing for hours, and now the hunger wraps around your ribs like an iron band. Noon is not a feast. Noon is survival. You step into the hut, ducking under the low lintel. The fire smoulders weakly, smoke curling upward in lazy threads. On the hearth, a pot bubbles faintly, the smell less tempting than you'd like, more earthy than savory. This is pottage, the eternal companion of the medieval peasant. Think of it as soup, but stripped of all the nice parts that make soup. Well, soup. Mostly water, a handful of beans, maybe a turnip if fortune smiled. If someone hunted a rabbit last week, there might still be a bone lending a ghost of flavor. But today, no such luck. Your family gathers slowly, children slump onto stools' eyes, already on the pot. Your partner ladles thin broth into wooden bowls, chunks of vegetable floating like rare treasure. You tear a piece of hard cheese, passing it around, each bite small enough to make it last, large enough to fool the tongue into thinking you've eaten. The bread waits beside it, dense and dark, baked days ago. You have to soak it in the broth, to chew without breaking a tooth. But that trick is as old as the bread itself. You take a spoonful, letting it linger on your tongue. The flavor is endurance. The kind of taste that doesn't make you sigh with pleasure, just sigh with resignation. You laugh softly, thinking how modern cookbooks would call this rustic and charge a fortune for it. Michelin stars, for watery turnips, who knew? One of the children asks for more cheese, and you shake your head gently. That wedge must last the week. Cheese here isn't luxury, it's preservation. Salt and thyme turn milk into something that keeps long after the cow has dried up. Some cheeses are so hard you could use them as weapons. You remember hearing that Roman soldiers once did just that, and honestly, you wouldn't be surprised if medieval farmers occasionally followed suit. As you chew, conversation stirs. Someone mutters that the bread tastes different, perhaps too much rye this season. Someone else insists it's fine, just denser. Bread isn't just bread, it's identity, politics, survival. There are records of riots sparked by bread prices. Centuries later, but the seed of that anger sits here in your mouth, gritty and unyielding. Some chroniclers claimed peasants barely noticed what they ate, but others suggested they cared deeply. Historians remain divided on how much flavor mattered in daily diets, though your tongue argues it mattered a lot. The pot scrapes empty faster than you'd like. The children lick spoons, eyes darting hopefully toward the pot again, but it gives no more. You tell them to be patient, that supper will come, though you both know supper will look very similar. Hunger in the Middle Ages is less a visitor than a roommate always there. Sometimes quiet, sometimes demanding, never leaving. A neighbor knocks lightly at the door, peeking in. He offers to share a small onion, grinning as though it were a feast. You trade him a heel of bread. The exchange is quick, practiced, almost ritual. You both chuckle at the absurdity in onion for bread, as though bartering treasures. Yet in truth, it is treasure. Food is currency, more reliable than coin. You nibble the onion raw, sharp and biting, your eyes watering. It cuts through the bland stew, making the meal almost lively. A child wrinkles their nose, but you smile, grateful for the sting on your tongue. This, too, is survival, finding joy where you can. Even in tears from onions, someone at the table recalls a story about a noble's feast. Tables groaning under roasted meat, spices from far-off lands, sauces rich and strange. The tale like a fairy story, part envy, part amusement. You roll your eyes. Sure, the Lord eats swan, but try getting that through winter without salt or smoke. Give you humble pottage well. No, don't give it. But you understand why it lasts. Asterisk, the noon meal ends with a kind of hush, spoons clinking down, hands brushing crumbs from laps. Bellies are not full, just distracted. You lean back, feeling that peculiar balance, hunger eased, but never gone, as if your body already plans the next request. The fire crackles faintly, and for a moment you almost doze, head nodding toward the table. Then you stand, stretching, hearing joints pop. No time for long rest. The fields, the animals, the fences, they all demand attention. Hunger might pause, but labor does not. You glance once more at the pot, blackened from years of smoke, sitting empty now like a skull. Tomorrow it will bubble again, with much the same contents. There's a comfort in its monotony, and a despair too. Like being told the same bedtime story every night until you stop listening. As you step outside, the sun glares down. A neighbor waves, a smear of broth still on his chin, and jokes that at least the stew didn't kill anyone this time. You laugh, shrugging, and reply that the day is still young. The road stretches before you, dusty and bright, and hunger walks beside you, quieter now, but always there. The sound comes first as a faint murmur, like metal sighing in the distance. Then it rolls louder, fuller, until the whole village seems to quiver under the call. You walk slowly toward the parish church, your feet dragging in the dust, because, let's be honest, there is only so much excitement one can muster for a sermon you've heard 100 times. Still, you go, because everyone does. The church bell is less an invitation than a command. Stone walls rise before you, pale against the sky, with patches of moss climbing the cracks. The doorway yawns wide, swallowing peasants one by one there. Rough cloaks brushing against damp wood. Inside, the air is cool and smells faintly of wax, smoke, and the kind of mildew that never quite leaves these old buildings. A single shaft of light sneaks through a narrow stained glass window, spilling onto the worn flagstones where generations have knelt, prayed, and dozed when the sermon stretched too long. You slide into a wooden pew, the surface polished not by carpentry skill, but by centuries of restless bottoms. The benches creak beneath the weight of the villagers, a chorus of squeaks that almost drowns the muttered prayers. Children fidget, their mothers' hands swatting them quiet. An old man coughs, the sound echoing, making even the priest glance up before resuming his chant. Faith, here, is heavy. It isn't the gentle, comforting kind you might wish for. It is edged with fear, with constant reminders of sin, of hellfire, of how your smallest indulgence, an extra gulp of ale, a sly glance at your neighbor's daughter, could tip you toward eternal damnation. The priest, stern and gaunt, has a voice that booms and cracks at once. He gestures wildly, painting pictures of the devil that feel a little too detailed, as if he's been thinking about them too much. And yet, despite the grimness, there's comfort in the ritual. The Latin words tumble from the altar, incomprehensible to most, but the rhythm lulls you, steady as the tolling bell outside. Candles flicker, their smoke curling upward, making halos that dance in the shadows. For a moment, the church feels like a cocoon, wrapping the weary villagers in something larger than their aching backs and empty bellies. A common event unfolds here, the parish announcements. The priest pauses his sermon to tell everyone when the next festival will be, who is to be married, and most eagerly whispered afterward, who has been caught in scandal. You catch the ripple of amusement when he mentions a widow who is seen too often at a neighbor's cottage, and the restrained giggles when he warns against idle chatter. Yes, nothing bonds a village like the hypocrisy of shared gossip cloaked in holy words. Your gaze drifts across the congregation, a girl, with hair the color of wheat plats, it nervously while stealing glances at a young man 2 rows ahead. A farmer's hands, cracked and black with soil, clutch the rosary like it might mend his crops. A mother cradles a baby that hiccups and burps loudly enough to draw stifled chuckles. Life, in all its noisy, unholy detail, insists on interrupting the sanctity of the sermon. There is a lesser-known truth here, one the priest doesn't say aloud. The church isn't just for worship. It's also the place where contracts are struck, disputes quietly settled, and alliances whispered into being. Marriages are less about love than about land and livestock, and every nod exchanged in these walls carries weight. What seems like piety is often politics in a rough wool cloak. Scholars still puzzle over how deeply fear and faith were intertwined in medieval villages. Was it genuine belief, or simply survival instinct dressed in holy robes? Did the people truly tremble at the thought of eternal fire, or were they more afraid of the priest's scolding glance in front of their neighbors? History doesn't hand us a neat answer, and maybe that uncertainty is its most human detail. And yes, if you are wondering, do people sneak naps during the sermon? Absolutely. One man's head lolls back so far it looks like divine possession. His wife nudges him with the sharpness of someone who has endured this routine many Sundays before. If grace doesn't save him, her elbow will. When the final blessing is spoken, there is a shuffle of relief, like a flock freed from its pen. The congregation spills back into the sunlight, blinking, stretching, chatting. The bell tolls again, gentler this time, as if sighing that duty has been done. You step out with the others, the weight of the sermon clinging like dust, but also the warmth of knowing you are not alone in this endless rhythm of toil, gossip, and prayer. The air outside feels lighter, fresher, even though it's the same air you breathed on your way in. Children chase each other in the churchyard, skirts swishing, boots thudding. Someone's goat bleats, as if adding its own irreverent hymn to the day. You smile despite yourself, because in the midst of warnings about sin and damnation, life insists on being loud, imperfect, and stubbornly alive. The sun sinks lower. a tired coin slipping behind the trees, and the sky softens into a bruise of gold and purple. You step back toward the fields, body heavy from the sermon's stiffness, but mind already bending toward the work that still waits. Rest isn't an option. The land does not forgive neglect, and fences have an uncanny talent for breaking it. The exact moment you need them whole. The air smells of trampled grass and smoke from distant hearths, the kind that clings to your clothes until even your dreams taste of ash. You pass a line of cottages, their thatched roofs glinting faintly, and catch sight of neighbors heading the same waitchuels slung across shoulders, children tugging at skirts, dogs circling heels. Evening labor isn't solitary. It's a quiet procession back into obligation, a final act before night pulls the curtain at the fields. The earth is still warm under your boots, though shadows stretch long across the furrows. You set to work with a fence that leans like a drunk at the alehouse. The wood groans as you straighten it, the rope scratching your palms as you knot it tight. A cow eyes you suspiciously, as if she suspects this repair is less about her safety than about saving you from tomorrow's lecture when the beast inevitably wanders off. Nearby, a group of children chase a runaway chicken, their laughter ringing across the pasture. The bird darts between their legs, wings flapping in indignation. One boy trips into a pile of dung, rises splattered, and everyone howls with glee, except his mother, who mutters a prayer for patience. These are the moments that stitch together the day. Small disasters, smaller triumphs, and laughter that floats above the weariness like smoke. The animals must be tended. Sheep bleat for attention, their wool thick with dust. You guide them toward their pen, prodding gently with a stick, though one stubborner way insists on veering sideways at every step. The pigs snort and grunt, shoving each other greedily at the trough. Chickens flutter into roosts, settling with a chorus of clucks as the sky deepens. You notice how each creature's rhythm matches the village's own, restless, hungry, then finally subdued. There is a lesser-known truth whispered among farmers. Evenings are when most accidents happen. Tools slip in tired hands, livestock kick when prodded too hastily, and sharp shadows hide holes ready to twist an ankle. A whole day's effort can unravel in the dim light, and more than one tale tells of a farmer lost to a careless swing or a startled horse. The danger hums beneath. The peace, a reminder that even routine carries teeth. Your neighbors call across the field, swapping fragments of gossip left unfinished at the churchyard. Someone jokes about the priest's cough, sounding suspiciously like the brewer's donkey, and laughter carries in the cooling air. Someone else shares news of a coming wedding feast, and you feel a flicker of anticipation, not for romance, but for the rare chance of bread, ale, and perhaps a bite of meat without guilt. Festivals are rationed joy, savored because they are so scarce. Scholars still question how villagers balanced faith, work, and survival in these long evenings. Were they driven more by duty to God, or to soil, or simply to hunger? Did labor feel sacred, or merely endless? The records offer glimpses, but never the full weight of the weariness in your shoulders now. History doesn't record blisters very well. And yes, fatigue plays tricks. You find yourself talking to the fence post as though it might thank you for tying it straight. You mutter a bargain with the cow that if she stays put tonight, you'll forgive her tomorrow's stubbornness. There's a quiet absurdity in it, all you laugh softly at yourself, because sometimes the only thing between sanity and despair is a whispered joke into the evening air. The light bleeds away faster now. Fields blur into shadows, hedges into dark walls. Tools Tools are gathered, ropes coiled, buckets emptied. One by one, neighbors drift back toward the cottages, lanterns flickering to life at doorways like stars fallen to earth. You wipe your brow with the back of your sleeve, sweat and dust mingling into streaks, and step away from the fence with a sigh. Behind you, the field rests in its own way, animals quiet, earth cooling. Ahead, the village glows faintly, alive with smells of cooking fires and the promise of a meal. However thin, your body aches with the strain of labor, but there's a strange peace in it too. The day has been hard, but you've bent it, shaped it, survived it. The path home crunches beneath your boots, and you let the rhythm of your steps soothe you. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, answered by another, until it fades into silence. The last bell of the church tolls, a softer echo of the day's demands, signaling that whatever hasn't been done must wait for another dawn. You walk toward the glow of the hearths, toward the voices waiting inside, carrying with you the tired satisfaction of work finished just in time. The path home brings you into the glow of firelight spilling from low doors, the thatch above catching stray sparks like stars snagged in straw. Your stomach has been grumbling for hours, a loyal companion more persistent than prayer. And finally you are steered by the smell of boiling pottage vegetables stewed into a thick mush that pretends to be filling. You step inside, shoulders brushing the doorway, and the room swallows you in warmth and smoke. Family gathers around the hearth, faces lit by the orange flicker. The cauldron hangs over the fire, steam rising in uneven bursts, promising comfort. More than taste. Children jostle for place, wooden bowls in hand, their eyes too big for the portions that will soon be ladled out. You lower yourself onto the bench, straw crunching beneath your boots, and let your body sag, grateful for sitting even if the seat feels like it might collapse under the collective weight of centuries. The first spoonful burns your tongue, and you curse softly under your breath. The stew tastes of cabbage, onion, and hope, thickened by barley when the harvest has been kind, thinned with water when it hasn't. Tonight it is halfway between, which is still better than yesterday's. Watery broth that could have been mistaken for dishwater if not for the floating turnip. Cheese appears on the table, hard enough to double as a weapon. Someone saws at it with a knife until crumbs scatter like yellow dust, and you take your piece gratefully. Salt clings to your lips, and you feel the faint pleasure of something beyond bland vegetables. Luxury, medieval style, cheese so tough. Your teeth file themselves, just trying to chew. Conversation begins in fits and bursts. A child recounts chasing the chicken earlier, dramatically adding that the bird flew like a dragon. Another swears he saw a fox near the hedgerow, and immediately the adults stiffen, calculating the cost of losing hens. Your neighbors. Laugh filters through the open window, carrying into your cottage like an invitation to join in. Though you stay put, your legs would mutiny if you dared to stand again. The room smells of smoke and sweat and damp wool. Not unpleasant exactly, but so thick it might cling to your dreams. You sip from a cup of weak ale, cloudy and sour, yet it slides down your throat like relief itself. Everyone drinks ale, even the children, because water is a trickster, here clear in the bucket, but harboring sickness that will put you flat on your straw bed. Ale is the safer gamble, and besides, it dulls the taste of the stew. There is a curious detail most forget. Forks aren't at your table. Knives and spoons serve their purpose, and sometimes fingers when hunger grows bold. A piece of bread, rough and dark with bran, doubles as a scoop and a napkin. You wipe your bowl clean with it, then bite into the soggy crust, finishing the meal in one efficient, if not particularly elegant, gesture. Emily Post would faint, but she hasn't been invented yet. Laughter rises again when someone attempts a joke about the priest's donkey. Apparently the beast brays louder than the evening bells. It's not much of a joke, but after a day of labor, any excuse to laugh feels like a feast in itself. The children giggle until they choke on stew, and you pat their backs while trying not to choke yourself from amusement. Scholars often puzzle over these suppers. Were they truly as monotonous as the records suggest, or did the company of family transform them into something richer? Did the blandness of pottage matter when laughter stirred into the pot alongside cabbage? The answer never quite lands. Written accounts tell us the ingredients, but not the warmth of your neighbor's voice or the way your child leans against your shoulder. Half asleep, with a mouth still stained by stew, there is a knock at the door, sudden and sharp, and everyone pauses mid-chew. For a moment, you think it could be a tax collector, or worse, the Lord's steward. But it turns out to be a neighbor returning the borrowed cauldron. Borrowing is a quiet currency here. Pots, tools, and favors pass between households like coins that never lose value. Without sharing, no one would survive. You thank them with a weary smile, promising a share of cabbage next week, even if you both know cabbage grows on every patch of soil in sight. The fire crackles, throwing sparks that race up the chimney, and a draft slips in through the door cracks, curling cold fingers around your ankles. Children huddle closer, their laughter fading into drowsy murmurs. You feel their warmth against you, tiny reminders of continuity, of tomorrow's tasks already waiting in their eyes. Hunger isn't gone and never really is, but it's dulled, softened into something manageable by the company of voices and fire. Your spoon scrapes the bottom of the bowl, a hollow echo that signals the end of supper. The pot is nearly empty, and though bellies are only half full, no one complains. Complaining doesn't add carrots. Instead, there is quiet gratitude, a kind of resignation wrapped in affection. Life is hard, yes, but it is shared, and in that sharing lies a thin, stubborn joy. As the fire dies to embers, you lean back, arms folded across your aching stomach. The day is almost finished, the night already creeping through the cracks. Outside, an owl calls, and the world seems to hush in respect. For now, you've eaten enough to survive tomorrow, and tomorrow is the only promise you ever really need. The supper fades into memory, the bowls stacked, the fire sinking low. Smoke curls lazily toward the rafters, and the last sparks wink like stubborn stars, refusing to let go. You rise slowly, legs protesting, and stretch the stiffness out of your back. The cottage hums with quiet now. Children are curled like kittens on straw mats near the hearth, their small breaths rising and falling in rhythm with the embers. You shuffle toward your own bedding, little more than a frame of wood filled with straw that scratches like 100 tiny needles. The blanket is rough wool, heavy enough to pin you down, yet never quite warm enough to stop the cold that slithers through every crack in the walls. You lower yourself onto it, the day's fatigue pulling you deeper than gravity ever could. The straw rustles under you, a sound as old as labor itself, and you allow your body to sink. The air is filled with whispers of night, the creak of timbers as the house settles, the muffled grunt of a pig shifting in the sty outside, the faint trickle of water from the well. An owl hoots from a nearby tree, steady solemn, reminding you that life continues beyond your small circle of firelight. Darkness here is thick, so thick that even the moon feels shy behind the clouds. Yet in that darkness is a comfort there, is nothing more to be done, no lord waiting, no field demanding. The world itself seems to give permission to rest. You close your eyes, and memories of the day shuffle past. The fence that leaned like a drunk, the stubborn cow with her judgmental stare, the children chasing a chicken as if it were a dragon. Even the taste of pottage lingers faintly, bland but strangely soothing. A soft smile tugs at your lips. Somehow, through all the toil and ache, you've survived. And survival, here, is victory. There's a truth rarely spoken, one that scholars murmur about but never pin down. Was life in these cottages misery unending, or was it threaded with moments of warmth that made the struggle bearable? Records give us taxes and tithes, crop, yields and famines, but they rarely capture the sound of a child's laughter echoing in a smoky room, or the quiet sigh of relief as tired bones collapse onto straw. Perhaps the answer is both that joy and hardship were inseparable, two sides of the same coin tossed into every peasant's hand. The chill presses closer, but you tuck the blanket tight, making a cocoon. You listen to the rise and fall of breathing. All around you, the comfort of knowing you are not alone in the dark. The ache in your body softens, not gone but muted, replaced by the slow tide of drowsiness. The night has its own rhythm, slower, quieter, coaxing you under like water pulling. Sand, your thoughts wander, then scatter, then drift. The fields blur into haze, the fences straighten themselves, the stew tastes richer in dreams. The owl's call stretches long, like a lullaby only nature knows. You are no longer holding the weight of the day releases you, so let your breath deepen now, let your eyes rest heavy, let the straw cradle you, scratchy though it may be, and imagine it softening beneath you with each heartbeat. Tomorrow will come with its demands, but tonight belongs to stillness. Sleep folds around. You like another blanket. The aches dissolve. The fire glows faintly. The world hums low, and your body finally surrenders to peace. Drift into it. Sink fully. Let go. Good night, my friend. May your rest be gentle, and may your dreams carry you far from toil into fields of ease that only sleep can grow.